In 2019, on the Lemay River in Argentina, a group of fishermen made a horrifying discovery. Their nets, cast in hopes of a morning catch, had pulled something from the depths that was not a fish, but the fragmented remains of a human body. Hours later, police confirmed the unthinkable. The victim was Cielo López, an 18-year-old girl who had vanished just days earlier. The question of who could commit such a heinous crime would soon haunt the entire community. Everyone called her Cielo, a name spoken with tenderness. Born on November 11, 2000 in Mendoza, Argentina, she grew up in Neuquén, a province in Patagonia, the youngest of three sisters. From a very young age, she faced a profound sorrow: the loss of her mother. Her father, a hard-working and loving man, did everything he could to provide for his daughters. But it was her older sister who stepped into a maternal role, caring for Cielo and her other sibling. Despite the hardship, they built a close-knit family, strong and full of love. Cielo was known for her sweetness, always affectionate, always present. It was because of this beautiful nature that everyone called her Cielo, which means sky or heaven in Spanish. The nickname was no accident. It was a way of describing the warmth and light she radiated. This is how she was known at home, in her neighborhood, among her friends, and even in the media when her story later moved so many. After finishing primary school, Cielo enrolled in night classes for her secondary education. During the mornings, she sold fried cakes and bread, wanting to earn her own income, help out at home, and not always depend on her father. She was responsible and generous, with a clear sense of what it meant to contribute, even at her young age. In 2019, she was on the verge of graduating. She dreamed of finding a good job to build a better future, to help her father and sisters, and to dote on her nieces and nephews whom she adored. But that year, an unexpected event would change everything. On September 11th, Cielo stayed the night at her sister Melissa's house to babysit her niece. The next morning, they had breakfast together, and then Cielo said she needed to go home to get ready for school. Her sister's partner gave her a ride. That was the last time her family saw her alive. On Friday, September 13th, Cielo had a doctor's appointment. Melissa had helped her schedule it after Cielo mentioned she was having some ear pain. That morning, Melissa started calling to remind her they needed to meet, but Cielo didn't answer. Melissa tried again and again, sending messages as well. Soon she noticed something unsettling. The messages showed as sent, but they weren't being delivered to Cielo's phone. When she tried calling, it went straight to voicemail. Concern quickly turned to alarm. Melissa contacted their other sister, Damaris, but she knew nothing either. Damaris explained she had spent the previous night at her partner's house, so she hadn't seen Cielo. All she could confirm was that Cielo's belongings were still at home. Her school backpack, her personal items, everything except her phone. The family's unease escalated into full-blown panic. They went to the police station to file a missing persons report, but the officers were dismissive. They suggested Cielo might have simply gone off with a friend, or perhaps a boyfriend they didn't know about. But her sisters knew that made no sense. Cielo always let them know her plans. She would never be out of contact for so many hours. It wasn't until Saturday, September 14th, that the police finally agreed to register the official report. On that day, Cielo López was formally declared a missing person. Her family, friends, and neighbors had already begun a frantic search, sharing her photo on social media and combing through every place they could think of. But as the days passed, not a single clue emerged. The search came to a tragic end on September 15, 2019, and not in the way her family had prayed for. That day, fishermen found human remains in the Lemay River, in the city of Plotier, where Cielo lived. The news spread like wildfire on social media, which is how Cielo's sisters first heard of the discovery. Initially, the victim's identity was unknown. The police contacted the sisters, asking them to help with identification. Though not all of her remains had been found, they recognized Cielo by the rings she wore and the clothes she had on. The following day, authorities returned to the river and found the rest of her body. The subsequent forensic report revealed chilling details. The cause of death was determined to be severe cranial trauma from 2 deliberate blows, which had caused a massive cerebral hemorrhage. The examination also confirmed that Cielo had been a victim of sexual assault. An initial analysis of the dismemberment led forensic experts to believe the cuts were made by someone with anatomical knowledge. This suspicion spread through the community, with many pointing fingers without evidence at a local butcher. However, the police soon debunked this theory. A more detailed forensic analysis corrected the initial hypothesis. The specialists clarified that the killer did not have technical anatomical skills. The cuts, though precise, had been made with a common flat-bladed kitchen knife. Crucially, during the autopsy, a DNA sample was recovered from the victim's body. Though its origin was unknown at the time, this piece of evidence would later become the key to solving the case. News of the brutal crime sent shockwaves through the province. Outrage was immediate. The citizens of Neuquén took to the streets, organizing marches and demanding justice for Cielo. The public pressure on the authorities was immense. The investigation initially focused on a young man mentioned by several of Cielo's friends, with whom she'd had a past conflict. However, the young man was fully cooperative, voluntarily handed over his cell phone and provided a solid alibi for the night Cielo disappeared. He was quickly ruled out as a suspect. Investigators then turned their attention to Cielo's cell phone, hoping its data could shed light on her final hours. Her last known social media activity was a WhatsApp story posted around 4 a.m. on the day she vanished. It contained only a single emoji, an alien. This technical approach proved fruitful. Police requested complete communication records from phone companies and digital platforms. It was through this data that they identified the last person to be in contact with her. The records revealed that Cielo's final known interaction before her murder was with a 28-year-old man named Alfredo Escobar. Police acted swiftly. On Tuesday, September 17, 2019, Alfredo Escobar was arrested. It emerged that he attended the same night school as Cielo, though they were not close. He had added her as a contact on Facebook, but according to friends, their interactions were limited to sporadic online messages. He had invited her to parties on several occasions, but Cielo had never accepted. Critically, they lived just a few blocks apart. By the time police moved to arrest him, Escobar was already on the move, having left with his parents for the neighboring province of Rio Negro. Authorities who had been surveilling his home believed the family had spotted them and was attempting to flee. A search of Escobar's large property yielded crucial evidence. The property included the main family house, a separate building under construction at the back, and a garden area. During the inspection of the garden, forensics noticed a section of grass that was sunken and flattened, suggesting a struggle or that someone had been held down on the ground there. But the most disturbing discovery was made inside the unfinished building. A luminol test revealed significant traces of blood that, despite an attempt to clean them, were still present. A DNA analysis confirmed the blood belonged to Cielo López. Investigators also found a pair of sneakers belonging to Escobar. They too had faint stains that had been washed. Forensic testing revealed the presence of blood, and once again the DNA matched Cielo's. Every new piece of evidence pointed directly at Alfredo Escobar. The final, irrefutable proof came from the DNA sample recovered from Cielo's body during the autopsy. When compared with Escobar's DNA, it was a perfect match. For the police, there was no longer any doubt. Alfredo Escobar was the man who had sexually assaulted and murdered Cielo López. With the evidence compiled, authorities charged Alfredo Escobar with sexual assault and femicide. He was ordered to be held in preventive detention, and it was decided that his case would be heard by a jury of his peers. In addition to the genetic evidence, geolocation data from both Cielo's and Escobar's cell phones painted a damning timeline. At 3:40 a.m. on September 13th, Escobar's phone pinged at Cielo's home. It was there for only a few minutes, but it placed him at the scene. Shortly after, both his phone and Cielo's phone began moving together, eventually settling for several hours at the same geographic point. Alfredo Escobar's property. The data trail showed that on Saturday, September 14th, the day Cielo was officially reported missing, Escobar's phone was located in the vicinity of the Limay River, the exact area where the young woman's remains would later be discovered. With this digital footprint, the police had a clear picture of the crime and the man responsible. All that remained was to meticulously reconstruct the facts and prepare the case for trial, with the hope of securing the maximum possible sentence. Drawing from testimonies, forensic evidence, and digital records, the police pieced together a solid hypothesis of what transpired in the early hours of that morning. According to their reconstruction, Cielo was with a friend until 3 a.m., sharing conversation and company. While she was still with him, she began receiving messages on Facebook. It was Alfredo Escobar. In his messages, he invited her to his house. After her friend left, Cielo continued chatting with Alfredo online. Eventually, she accepted his invitation. Alfredo went to pick her up from her home, which would explain why her phone was briefly located at her residence at 3:40 a.m. From there, they both went to his house, where they remained for several hours. Upon arriving, they spent a few minutes together. At some point, Alfredo attempted to force a sexual encounter with Cielo. She refused. Investigators believe this rejection triggered Alfredo's fury. He took her to the backyard, where he sexually assaulted her. But the violence did not end there. Alfredo inflicted a severe head injury, causing a traumatic brain injury. He then moved her body to a building under construction at the back of the property. According to the forensic report, she lay there for 2 to 4 hours. While the exact duration could not be determined, one harrowing fact was confirmed. Cielo did not die instantly. She agonized for a long time. The medical examiners concluded that had she received timely medical attention, her life could have been saved. After moving Cielo to the construction site, Alfredo Escobar made a decision that revealed his intent to erase every trace of his crime. He turned off the young woman's cell phone. With this act, he sought to prevent anyone from calling her, to make it seem as if she could no longer be contacted. His objective was clear: to ensure that no one could track his location or Cielo's, and that any attempt to find her would fail from that moment on. When Alfredo realized Cielo was no longer responsive, he began to conceal what had happened. He manipulated her body and placed it in several bags. He did not move them immediately. According to the investigation, the bags remained in one area of the property for several hours. It wasn't until the following day, Saturday, September 14th, that Alfredo decided to move them. Alfredo's cell phone records were crucial in establishing this timeline. That night, his device was located near the Limay River. It was there that he disposed of Cielo's remains. Police concluded that Alfredo was not fully aware of the exact spot where he was leaving the bags. He likely believed he was casting them into a deep part of the river. But in the darkness, and perhaps due to his altered state, He failed to notice that the remains had landed in a shallower, more accessible area. It was for this reason that, eventually, they were found by fishermen. Alfredo's arrest followed soon after, and the case proceeded to trial, which began in November of 2020. During the proceedings, Alfredo attempted to change his version of events and deflect responsibility. He testified that he had been under the influence of drugs with a friend named Matias that night. According to his story, he and Cielo had consensual sex, after which he left her alone with his friend. He claimed it was Matias, supposedly also on drugs, who had murdered her. Alfredo admitted to the court that he helped clean the blood in his house and that he was the one who disposed of the body. However, he insisted he was not the killer. Alfredo's defense presented witnesses intending to improve his image before the jury. The result, however, was the opposite. Several witnesses described Alfredo as a person with serious emotional control issues. They said he had outbursts of rage, that he was aggressive, and that this behavior was worsened by his habitual drug use. They specifically mentioned his frequent use of cocaine, which made him even more unpredictable and violent. Furthermore, evidence from Alfredo's social media was introduced. Several of his posts revealed violent behavior, with messages and expressions that reinforced the image of a dangerous person. Instead of helping, this testimony and evidence only strengthened the prosecution's case against him, weakening any attempt by the defense to distance him from Cielo López's murder. Beyond Alfredo Escobar's own testimony, there was no evidence whatsoever implicating his friend Matias in the murder. Although Alfredo tried to involve him as part of his defense, the investigation made it clear that while Matias had been at the house on the morning of the crime, he had left long before Cielo arrived. Call logs, location data, and statements confirmed this. The timeline established by investigators was irrefutable. After 3:40 a.m., the only person who remained in the house with Cielo was Alfredo Escobar. There was no sign of anyone else's presence at that time. This, combined with all the other evidence, the DNA, the cell phone locations, the blood stains, the attempt to hide and destroy the body, and his history of violent conduct, reinforced the conviction that Alfredo was the one who committed the crime. 1 month after the trial began in December 2020, the verdict was delivered. Alfredo Escobar was found guilty of all charges in the murder of Cielo López. The court sentenced him to life in prison, the maximum penalty under Argentine law. However, it is important to clarify a legal point that often causes confusion. In Argentina, a life sentence does not necessarily mean a person will spend the rest of their natural life behind bars. The law stipulates that a person sentenced to life must serve a minimum of 35 years in prison. Only after this period can the convicted individual apply for certain benefits, such as a semi-release program, temporary leave, or even parole, provided they meet the legal requirements and receive a favorable evaluation. This means that although Alfredo Escobar received the highest sentence allowed by Argentine law, he will not necessarily remain in prison until the end of his days. If he completes those 35 years and requests a review of his sentence, he could obtain some form of supervised release. Despite this legal reality, the trial represented a significant moment of closure for Cielo's family. An exemplary sentence was handed down, their suffering was acknowledged, and responsibility for the crime was officially established. For those who loved her, justice had been served.